My name is Justin Wilson. I am an Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions for Washington University in St. Louis, or affectionately WashU. And I am so glad to have you all here today as we are hoping to help demystify and unlock and help you navigate this financial aid process that we have here at WashU. Now, you all are all admitted students and their families, of course, so you all should have your actual financial aid offers in front of you. If you don't, definitely feel free to pull those up on a separate screen because you want to make sure that you are looking exactly at what we are talking about as we go through this presentation. But I wanted to, again, just go ahead and really quickly welcome you all. Welcome to WashU. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us to learn more. And I am really excited to introduce you to the man of the hour, the creme de la creme of financial aid, not just here at WashU, but in a general sense in financial aid in the work that we do. His name is Michael Runowitz, or Mike Runowitz. He goes by Mike, it's fine. But Mike is our Associate Vice Provost for the Student Financial Services Division within the Office of Admissions, Aid, and Access at Washington University in St. Louis. That's such a long title, but I am so glad to be able to share all of that information with you and to turn it over to Mike to share some really helpful and great information with you as well.
Justin, thank you so much. And everybody, it's so great to see you all tonight. And congratulations, I'm so excited. I know some of you were recently admitted, some of you may have been admitted during our early decision rounds or maybe through QuestBridge, but it's super exciting to to be talking to you all tonight. So as I get started, I'm going to be sharing my screen. So give me just a moment to get it started. Justin, can you confirm everything looks good on your end?
I can confirm it looks fantastic.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So this is me. I serve as Assistant Vice Provost and Director of Student Financial Services. Our email address, financial@woostel, and our main number listed right up here, and we'll share our contact information on the last few slides. But what I'm here to talk to you about today is a financial aid offer letter. I want to walk through an example of a WashU Financial Assistance Award and give you a sense of some of the ways that we support students. So I know Justin mentioned if you pull up your financial assistance offer, you might be able to follow along. That would be great. If you don't have your financial assistance offer, I'll be walking through a general comprehensive financial aid offer. So I think it will apply to you in any case. So as we start thinking about financial aid, there are three components of a financial aid award at WashU. The first one are WashU scholarships and grants. The second one might be federal and state grants. And then the last one is a work-study job. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, WashU, this is an example of a student who is getting a pretty generous financial assistance offer. They're receiving a combination of Washington University and a federal Pell Grant totaling $95,185. And then on top of that, they've got a federal work-study job for $2,500. And the total of this financial assistance award is that $97,685. And I'm not going to focus too much on the numbers today. I'm going to focus more on what each thing means and more importantly, what it means to you. So this financial aid award, scholarships and grants, and a work-study job totals that $97,685. And at WashU, beginning in fall of 24, we stopped including loans as part of our financial assistance award. So you'll see on this financial assistance award, we've got something listed as additional WashU scholarship of $5,500. If you've got something like that in your financial assistance award, that is our program to replace loans with additional Washington University scholarships. So you didn't receive loans as part of your financial assistance award. We increased that scholarship to overcome those. So on the second page of your financial assistance offer is the cost of attendance. And the cost of attendance, we break that down into direct costs due to the university and then indirect costs that will vary based on your student and will also, might vary depending on your student's situation. So tuition and fees, so that includes tuition, it includes our student activity fee, and it includes a student health fee. And the tuition and fees total $69,594. And housing and food. Housing and food, we base all of our financial assistance offer on a modern double room and a platinum meal plan. So a platinum meal plan is what's included in your financial assistance offer. So if you add tuition, student activity fee, the health and wellness fee, our housing, and our meal plan, that total for this student totals that $97,685. So in this case, and I don't want you to remember the numbers from the last slide, but in this case, this student's actually going to be receiving a refund from the university. But we estimate that $753, that's a negative number. The university is going to actually provide a refund to this student, half in the fall and half in the spring. Before we get into how the refunds work, I want to talk about the non-billed charges. So when you hear about non-billed charges, those are expenses that we expect a student will incur, but they vary by student and they're not billed by the university. So those might include things like books and supplies. And we include an allowance of $1,357 for books and supplies. Some students might spend a little bit less on that. Some students might spend a little bit more. But on average, we would expect $1,357 to cover students' books and supplies. We include transportation, and transportation is based on how far from the university you live. If you live more than 150 miles from the university campus, then we build in an airfare allowance for your transportation. If you live within 150 miles, you don't receive that airfare allowance. Other expenses. We include other expenses that I would consider these things personal and miscellaneous. So the things that you're spending money on now, you might go out to a movie with your friends. You might still have some personal and miscellaneous expenses like that. Certainly you've got your personal, your personal supplies like your toiletries and things. You'll continue to purchase those. So we build those into other expenses. So when we think about these non-billed costs, we survey students every single year, and we think that these are realistic amounts that students are able to budget to and are able to spend annually. So also on this page of the financial aid offer, you're going to see work study subtracted. And I'll talk about on the next slide why we subtract work study from down here and not from up here under scholarships and grants. Scholarships and grants, that's money that is available to be paid to the university or to cover your charges to the university as soon as that bill is created. Work study, on the other hand, you'll earn that money over the course of the semester. So most students spend that money on the other expenses that they have, those personal and miscellaneous. So I wanted to highlight the $93,685 in scholarships and grants. If you remember from the first page, and I know I told you didn't have to remember this, it actually was it was a little bit higher. It was $95,185 in scholarships and grants. But $1,500 of those scholarships and grants are considered startup grants. And that means that we're going to provide those money or those funds to students at the beginning of each semester. So their students are going to receive those funds directly. They're not available to cover a student's expenses or to cover the bill to WashU. So we subtract those startup grants from the scholarship and grants when we determine how much additional funds are owed to the university. So for this student, I mentioned that they were going to receive a refund for $753 for the academic year. And the way that that refund will work is at the beginning of the fall semester, they'll receive a refund for $376.50. And then at the beginning of the spring semester, they would receive a similar refund. They only get it at the beginning of the spring semester or at the beginning of each semester. And there are no separate refunds or disbursements or any kind of stipends that we provide to cover travel, books, and supplies. So you're using your refund to pay for those travel, books, and supplies. So in this example, you can use $376.50 each semester to pay for books and supplies, transportation, other expenses. And then your financial aid offer might be different. So I already talked a little bit about the work study. Since your work study earnings, since you'll earn those over the course of the semester, work study jobs are similar to a part-time job, except for you'll be working on campus. We have a job fair at the beginning of the first semester where students and employers match with each other. We have a system that helps us with that. And then students will earn those work study funds over their fall and spring semester. So we recommend students use those work study funds to cover the non-billed charges, things like personal and miscellaneous, maybe transportation, or even some students might save their work study earnings from the fall to use it for purchasing their spring books. But the important thing about work study is it's not available until a student has earned those funds. So in this case, in this student's example, this leaves $2,563 of non-billed costs that still need to be covered. And I mentioned still need to be covered. Those costs might vary by student, but this is our best estimate of what a student will have to spend over the course of the year. So that 2,563 in this example, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to use their $753 refund, and they're going to use $2,500 of work study. But after the $750 refund, this family is going to have expenses of about $1,800 or about $900 for each academic year. So in this example for this student, this family is likely to pay about $900 per semester for their student, and that could come from savings, or that might come from cash flow from a family's cash flow, or that could come from parent or family borrowing. But there would be an expectation for this family that it would cost about $900 per semester to cover some of those non-billed costs. So you're not sending that money to the university. You're helping your student, or as a student, you're using your funds to provide those books and other expenses. So financial aid offers at WashU, in this case, this is a need-based financial aid offer, and it's based on the CSS profile and any supporting documentation that students have provided. We created and we released financial assistance offers this year without a FAFSA. So if you have not submitted your FAFSA yet, we probably have been, or we will start reminding you in the financial aid office to get that FAFSA submitted as soon as possible. And we need that in order to confirm any eligibility for federal financial aid that you have. And we'll continue to remind you. So if you haven't submitted your FAFSA yet, it's definitely not too late. Just get that in as soon as you possibly can. And now I want to pivot for just a few minutes, and I want to talk about first-year grants. And first-year grants, not all students who are eligible for financial assistance receive first-year grants, but I want to talk through those because many students are, and I'll talk about the eligibility qualifications in just a couple of minutes. So first-year grants, these are one-time grants that are provided only to first-time entering students, and they consist of up to 3 different grants. The first grant is a startup grant, and it's a $1,500 startup grant, and it can be used toward the cost of any kind of startups, any kind of supplies to get a student, kind of going at WashU. And I'll talk about how that works in just a second. The second grant is a $1,550 summer earnings replacement grant. And what that means is we will not financial aid offers generally expect that students between their senior and their first year of college earn some money that they will use toward paying for college. And at WashU, we have historically assumed high school seniors can pay $1,550 from their summer earnings toward the cost of attending WashU. If you're eligible for these grants, we will replace that expectation with an additional scholarship of $1,550. And then lastly, if you're eligible for something called the technology grant, we'll provide you with a grant of $1,550 that may only be used toward the purchase of a laptop and a service plan at our bookstore. And I'll talk about how that works in just a minute. So first year grants, the startup and the summer earnings replacement grant, those are available to any student who comes from a family with $75,000 or less in household income. The technology grant, that's the grant that provides a computer for all students, a computer at our bookstore. That is for all students receiving need-based financial aid if they come from families of $200,000 or less. So most of our families who are receiving many of our families who are receiving need-based financial aid will also be eligible for the technology grant. Fewer families will be eligible for the startup and summer earnings replacement grant. Only those families whose family incomes fall below $75,000. So what can these grants be used for? So the startup grant it can be used for housing supplies, books, winter clothing, school supplies. One of the things about our residential halls, they require extra long twin sheets. And I didn't have any extra long twin sheets until I went to college. So that was an expense that I was going to have as I entered college. So the startup grant is for those kind of things, making sure that students are getting the best start possible at Washington U or at WashU. The next grant is a summer earnings replacement grant. And the startup grant, students are going to receive those startup grants if you're eligible at the beginning of the fall semester and at the beginning of the spring semester. So the startup grant is $1,500. You'll receive $750 at the beginning of the fall semester, $750 at the beginning of the spring semester. The summer earnings replacement grant, this is basically added to your financial aid, and this is applied directly to charges billed to you by the university. So tuition, fees, your housing, and your meal plan. And then your technology grant, the technology grant, that's actually a credit at the WashU bookstore for $1,525 that may only be used for the purchase of a computer. And I'll talk about some of how that works in just a couple of minutes. So the startup grant, I started talking about this a little bit before I remembered that I had this slide coming up next, but we're going to provide your startup grant $750 in the fall, $750 in the spring. In the fall, that's early August. About the time that you're arriving on campus is when you're going to receive your startup grant. And you're going to receive $500 will be direct deposited into the checking account that you eventually identify through our Workday system. And then $250 will be provided to you as a campus bookstore credit. So you can use $250 as you wish at the bookstore, and then $500 will be directly deposited into your checking account. And you may also use that as you wish for startup supplies. And then the exact thing will happen again in early January. You'll get $500 by direct deposit, and then a $250 credit at the campus bookstore. The summer earnings replacement grants, you'll get $775 for the fall, $775 for the spring, and these are applied to your student account with the rest of your financial assistance. So you'll see this as a line item applied to your student account, just like you'll see your financial assistance subtracted. And then lastly is the technology grant. The technology grant is $1,525. The technology grant may only be used in a student's first semester, and we require that it be used by December 1st. So all of our technology grants must be used by December 1st, or students lose those technology grants. They're available for students one time their first semester, and then we would expect that that computer with the warranty would last all 4 years. Uh, this credit is provided through an online account at the WashU campus bookstore. So if you want to take advantage of this computer, you have to purchase it at the bookstore. If you've already got a computer that you purchased at another store or at another vendor, we won't reimburse you for it. And then we won't, you're not allowed to sell your computer, or you're not allowed to exchange your computer or trade it for something else. That being said, your grant, as long as it's being used for a computer, if you wanted to supplement that grant with additional funding of your own, you could purchase a more expensive computer with that grant and use the $1,525 toward that computer. But we do know that the $1,525 computer will cover our minimum meeting computer at WashU with a 4-year warranty. So you'll be able to walk out the door with taxes, with a warranty, and with a computer with that technology grant. So the last thing, or the last couple of slides, I wanted to just show you faces for maybe your financial assistance counselor. We've got 6 folks who are working routinely with a counselor, with entering students. Max, Ariel, Danielle, Jennifer, Vicky, and Zach are our counseling team. And you might work with any one of these students, but each of you is matched with one of these counselors in SFS. And it's our hope that you would stay with that counselor for all 4 years of your time at WashU. It's that counselor that gets to know you, gets to know your family's situation. And if anything changes with your family, it's that counselor that really understands, what your family's situation is. So while we hope that you'd never need anybody in financial aid, and it will go as smoothly as possible, and you'll never even have to stop by the financial aid office in all 4 years, we want to make sure that you have the resources, because financial aid can be complicated, and we stand by to help you with any questions you have, and heaven forbid, any changes that your family experiences over your time at WashU. And then I wanted to also introduce you to a few other people that you might work with. So I'm on the bottom, and Val is also a person on our leadership team. But Nija, Wade, and Nina, they serve in our SFS Service Center. So if you stop by SFS, and if you haven't visited yet this fall, and maybe you're coming for a Bear Day, maybe tomorrow, or maybe you're coming for a Bear Day before the end of the year, if you stop by our service center, you'll work with one of these smiling faces as you come into Student Financial Services. So between the last slide and this slide, those are the folks you will most routinely work with in Student Financial Services. We have a team of people behind the scenes supporting you as well. So they're on scene, but they are doing the work to keep financial aid and to keep things running smoothly as well. So at this point, I'd like to open the floor up to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a minute, or I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to let Justin help with the Q&A portion.
Excellent. I know that you all can't really articulate your excitement and your thankfulness to Mike, but I hope that behind your screens you are snapping and clapping. I think that was a really good presentation, Michael, and I really appreciate that you answered a lot of the questions that were already in people's minds. And so We do have a good number of questions here that I want to make sure that I throw out to you, that I wanted to be answered live. This first question is, another school my son is considering said in future years, only the FAFSA would be needed to complete would be needed to complete and not the CSS profile. Is that the same at WashU? I think I know the answer, but I wanted to make sure I heard from the expert.
So at WashU, we do ask for a CSS profile in returning years. That being said, we use something called a lighter profile, so it won't be anywhere near as complicated as the CSS profile that you did as a first year student, but we do ask for the profile. And the reason that we ask for the profile is I have been in financial aid for 21 years. And in 21 years, the CSS profile has been delivered on the date it was promised 21 times. And there's a lot less certainty with the FAFSA over the last 3 or 4 years with FAFSA delivery dates. So that CSS profile allows us to deliver financial aid even if unexpected things happen with the federal process.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. So next question, how does an employer's tuition benefit program influence financial aid? I know this is a pretty broad question, but let's talk about it.
Sure. So some folks have a tuition benefit that might help children of employees pay for higher education, and that's called a tuition benefit. And a tuition benefit is going to be considered for financial aid and will offset a student's eligibility for financial aid. So a tuition benefit will offset a student's eligibility for need-based aid in all cases, and in many cases will at least be considered with merit aid. So it's absolutely something to reach out to the financial aid office. At WashU, one of the questions that we asked on, or one of the questions on the CSS profile is about whether or not a family is receiving those benefits. So we might be already reaching out to families if we know about a benefit.
Excellent. So what if we have a full ride scholarship and one other outside scholarships? Um, will the outside scholarship be deducted from the full ride scholarship, or will the excess funds be refunded to the students?
Okay, so the way outside scholarships work at WashU, and WashU has a really generous outside scholarship policy. We will stack outside scholarships until the total of a student scholarship and grants is the full cost of attendance. So the full cost of attendance. So we'll replace the parent contribution with scholarship and grants, but we will not provide financial aid, including outside scholarships, that exceeds the full cost of attendance. So if you have a scholarship from WashU that is already covering your full cost of attendance, and then you get an outside scholarship on top of that, my best advice, reach out to that scholarship providing organization. You might want to start with your financial aid officer because we can give you maybe a little bit more insight into exactly how your student situation will work. But I would reach out to that scholarship organization, and number one, maybe you can use that for studying in the summer, one summer, or for using that toward higher expenses in a semester abroad. Or maybe you can defer that until you're in graduate school, or maybe some of that money has to be returned. So that would be the last situation. But the maximum that students can get funded is the full cost of attendance.
Excellent. Okay, Mike. If we didn't apply for financial aid when we apply, or excuse me, let me rephrase. If we didn't apply for financial aid when we applied before for admission, can we still apply this year or maybe next year?
So the short answer to both of those is yes. Absolutely, you can apply. So we stand by. You can always apply. We stand by ready to make those adjustments. So if circumstances have changed, that would be the most common reason someone would not apply and now want to apply. But absolutely.
Perfect. I also just want to say to the participants, you guys are asking really fantastic questions. Most of these questions I flagged to answer live instead of answering them behind the scenes because you guys are really thinking through deeply what you need to know, and I love that. So the next question is the cost of a dual major or minor covered within tuition, or would we go through a different method of getting those costs covered?
Sure. So, to simply answer that question, absolutely, financial aid can cover the cost of a dual major or minor. And the reason that is WashU has a flat tuition rate, and you can take a certain number of credits for that same rate. So, you still get your major, your second major, or your minor in those same first 4 years that financial aid is covering. So, absolutely, that is a possibility, and many students are getting double majors or multiple majors.
Absolutely. So the next question is simple. Is there health insurance available through the university? And the answer is yes to that question. But Mike, I was actually wondering if we could go a little deeper with the health insurance question and talk about is financial aid able to cover any of the health insurance at WashU?
Sure. So let's take a quick step back to talk a little bit how our health insurance works. So every student, every undergraduate student at WashU is required to have health insurance. And you will go through a waiver process. If you have health insurance through your family, then you will complete the waiver process, and then most students will just continue with health insurance through their family. Um, if you do not have health insurance through your family, you'll be required to use WashU's health insurance. And if you are required to have WashU's health insurance, meaning you couldn't waive out of that, um, and you come from a family with $75,000 or less in income, we will cover the cost of that health insurance grant for you. So if you're required and you come from a background where your income is $75,000 or less, financial aid will cover that health insurance grant for students.
Wonderful. Quick question, I think, does the technology grant show up on your financial aid letter?
It does not. So the technology grant, it does not show up on the financial aid letter.
Excellent. And what about the summer student earnings expectation?
So the expectation, so we don't provide that in subsequent years. So in subsequent years, there is essentially an expectation that students are earning something and contributing something. A lot of times students might earn something through a stipend or through an internship. Um, so there is an expectation. I would say we can talk about those, students can talk about what possibilities there are with their financial aid counselor, maybe their second semester.
Excellent. Um, Could the campus store credit be used to buy a computer? Now, I know the technology grant can, but the other grant, the startup grant, can that be used to buy a computer? I actually asked this because I actually don't know the answer, Michael. So,
So the other campus store credit that's part of the startup grant, that can be used for anything. So that could be used to increase your technology grant. Absolutely, it could. And I do see another related question to the not tech, to the technology grant. And the question was about, do all families with less than $200,000 of income qualify for the technology grant? And my expectation is yes. And as long as you're receiving need-based aid. But I will say that it is likely that you have not heard from us formally letting you know that you've received that technology grant yet. We are we are we are likely going to inform families of that this week. We had some uncertainty in computer pricing, so we weren't ready to go yet, but we're ready.
excellent. You took the words right out of my mouth because I was going to go directly to that question, Mike. So let's talk about the summer earnings replacement grant. Um, can you clarify the summer earnings replacement grant? Is it meant to be given to students who did not work the summer prior to matriculating or between freshman and sophomore year?
So this is meant to replace the expectation that students work between their senior year of high school and their first year of WashU. So it becomes part of their first year financial aid offer, expecting that those students will not have to make a contribution from the work they did that summer. and
Absolutely.
it will only be for first-year students.
Perfect. Um, and we kind of talked about this already, but I want to make sure that we circle back to it. When are students notified about the technology grant?
I'm going to say within the next 4 or 5 business days.
Fingers crossed. Absolutely. As I think a lot of you know, there's a lot up in the air right now with higher education in general, and especially when it comes to financial aid. So, Mike is we're both really hoping that we can get this information out to you as soon as possible. But it's also hard when the unknown is as unknown as it is, for sure. Um, I don't know the answer to this question too, so Mike, so I'm going to ask you: if a grandparent's 529 is used to help pay for college, will that affect grant aid?
So this is a great question. This is at the edge of the kind of question I can answer in a big public forum like this. But a 529 plan is a tax advantaged college savings plan. Almost always they are owned by the parent for the benefit of a student, and 529 plans are generally treated as a parent asset on the financial aid application. In this example, if a grandparent owns that 529 plan and pays and uses that 529 plan to pay on behalf of a student, the only impact that will have to financial aid is that has to be reported 2 years after that money is used. So the way it works is that money, like let's say a grandparent paid $5,000 out of a tax advantage savings account for that student would have to report on their FAFSA 2 years from now that somebody paid $5,000 of expenses on their behalf. So it can impact your financial aid 2 academic years after grandparents use 529 funds. So my best advice is if your grandparents are going to use 529 plans to help a student pay for college, use that in your third and fourth year, or then use it in your second, third, and fourth year. Don't use it that first year where you know it's going to potentially impact financial aid eligibility.
Excellent. Mike, this next question is about tuition increases. So, tuition increases for 25-26 were higher than the previous year, and the current government funding issue was cited. Now, I know they're talking about the lovely article that we saw in our Stud Life newsletter. So the question is, I understand the situation is currently fluid and uncertain, but should we expect approximately the same percentage increase for 2026, 2029?
So, I really don't have any way to answer that question. We're not part of the office that contributes to the thinking on the tuition increase specifically. What I do know is when we announced the tuition increase this year, we announced that a little bit later than we traditionally had. And when we did, we made adjustments to all of our financial aid awards dollar for dollar to cover those cost increases. So financial aid will continue to increase with any cost increases, but I don't know what those percentage increases will be. And there's a related question in here about merit scholarships,
Mhm.
specifically Danforth, Irvin, or the Rodriguez program, or any other tuition sensitive scholarship. So if you receive a scholarship at Washington University that says it's a full tuition scholarship, or it's a full tuition plus a $2,500 stipend, it's always going to be a full tuition scholarship or a full tuition plus $2,500 stipend. So those merit scholarships, and there's not very many of them, but those merit scholarships increase automatically from year to year to cover any increases in tuition.
Absolutely. And just to add on what Mike just said, there aren't very many of those merit scholarships, the Danforth, Anika Rodriguez, or John B. Irvin. And so I really just need you all, if your student did earn one of those scholarships, to pat yourselves on the back. Less than 12% of our students receive those merit scholarships. So your student did a fantastic job, and you should really be proud of them. All right. Next question. Can you explain, Mike, how the PEP prepay plan works?
Yes, I can. I do not know if I can explain it simply enough for, I don't know if I can do it in this forum,
Okay.
but let me address the specific question about the PEP prepay plan. PEP is our Partners in Education with Parents program, and it offers three potential options. It offers a prepayment option, it offers a borrowing option, and it offers a combination of those options. Simply, the prepayment option is if your family has savings and you want to prepay all 4 years of tuition and fees at first, I mean, and it could be housing as well, at first year rate, you are insulated from all future cost increases. So if you prepay it, you're insulated from all future cost increases. You are prepaying all 4 years up front. In any case, if something happens and your student doesn't continue at WashU, you would get a refund for all of the unused semesters. Um, for all of the unused semesters. I would say if there are more detailed questions about the PEP program, those are great questions for your for your SFS counselor. So I would encourage you to reach out to your counselor.
All right. This is a simple question, I think. How does financial aid work for housing when you are living off campus?
So first year students will all be living on campus, but as a general requirement, there are very few exceptions made to that. If a student eventually lives off campus, we they will receive a financial assistance award to cover what we think housing is going to cost. So it's going to be a similar financial assistance award. And instead of paying Washington University for that housing, those students would receive a refund at the beginning of the semester and would then use that to pay for their rent, to pay for their utilities, to pay for any related expenses. So financial aid will cover a student even if they're living off campus.
Excellent. Another simple question, and this just came in, so I apologize for those who I'm skipping right now, but this is really easy. Does financial aid increase when a sibling enters college, when a sibling enters a college, and by how much?
So the first part of that is very simple. Yes, at WashU, we consider the number of students in college. It's going to increase when a student goes to college. Um, how much is going to increase really depends on how much you started with, because what happens is um, in the financial aid formula, we're doing a calculation of how much we expect your family to contribute. And what happens is when you have two students in college, that number is divided by almost two. So instead of contributing the same amount for one student, you're now contributing that same amount for two students. So financial aid is going up accordingly. So in some cases, financial aid can go up a lot. In some cases, it's just a little bit, but it's always going up with two in college.
Absolutely. All right, so this next question, Mike, I apologize for this because this is actually a question that I wanted to answer out loud. So we're going to talk about it. And then if you have any feedback to give as well, definitely give that too. So the next question is following up on the double bachelor's degree program, our double bachelor's degree tuition, to confirm the 4 years of financial aid can fully cover, say, 140 credits for a double bachelor's of science. What about a bachelor's of science and a master's of science in 4 years? I want to say a couple things about this. So number one, I want to be very clear that when we're talking about a dual major, we're actually not talking about a double bachelor's degree. So there are some schools where you are coming to that school and you are effectively doing a double bachelor's degree program. You're going to receive a certificate once you graduate. Well, it's your diploma, it's not a certificate, but it's going to say, I graduated with a bachelor's of science in psychology, and I also graduated with a second bachelor's of science in nursing. For WashU, that doesn't happen. So when we're talking about our dual degree program, we're talking about the fact that you can have a primary major and a secondary major, and those two majors are easily able to be completed within a 4 year period, and your advisor is going to make sure that that happens. But you're only going to receive a diploma that shows that primary major on your diploma, right? So if you're coming in and saying, I want to do both psychology and nursing, whatever your primary is, that's probably going to be psychology. It's going to be a bachelor's of science in psychology. Now, if a student did want to do a complete double bachelor's degree program, I actually don't know how that would work. And I don't know if we're really the school that does a lot of that work. But what I can say is students, 85% of our students report back by the time they've graduated that they pursued more than one academic program at WashU, and most of the time those programs are across divisions. That's so easy to do. But it's not going to be that you're getting two separate bachelors. You're getting that one bachelor's, but you're also able to say, and I had a secondary major within whatever that next major was. In terms of what about BS and MS in 4 years, those are two very separate buckets of financial aid. And Mike, I don't know if you have anything to say about all of that, but we have some programs that are 3-2 programs on campus where you can shuffle into the master's degree without completing all 4 years of your bachelor's degree first. Um, but yeah, Mike, do you want to talk about those buckets, those different buckets of financial aid?
Well, I was going to talk a little bit about we do have some programs like Justin's talking about where there are specific pathways where you can earn your master's in a shorter amount, bachelor's and master's in a shorter amount of time. Undergraduate aid is going to cover the first 4 years. Any graduate aid or graduate expenses will cover in the fifth year. Students cannot take graduate level classes and cover them for undergraduate aid as even if it's within the number of credits that they take. So our aid is covering undergraduate aid. Master's level classes would not, financial aid does not cover master's level classes at WashU, undergraduate aid.
Absolutely. This next question is, I understand you have a loan program for the balance. How and when do we apply? And I think when we're talking about loan program, we're talking about like a payment plan type of situation. How and when do you apply for like a payment plan situation with WashU?
So I would say that the best time to apply is payments are generally due starting in August. I would apply at the very beginning of July, which is when you will, I say we, this is the big we. Student accounting will send the first bill to students or the student account on July 1st. So once you have that bill, you'll see all of your charges, you'll see your housing, you'll see financial aid subtracted. At that point, you know exactly what your charges are going to be, and that would be the best time to apply, apply for a payment plan. You could apply for a loan. Like if you wanted to apply for the PEP loan payment plan, you could absolutely do that even beginning now or even beginning May or June. But definitely by July, you'll want to get that process going.
Excellent. So we've got three more questions to answer right now. If you have another question that you want answered, I apologize. It looks like we're not going to necessarily have time for that, but I absolutely want to highlight what Mike said before and showed you those beautiful pictures of all those faces of the people that works on his team. You all have an SFS counselor that you can reach out to if you have more questions, and especially more specific questions about the financial aid process. They are not here to leave you high and dry. Just to get on my soapbox a little bit, Mike, and I apologize for this, but I've worked for a couple of different institutions, and Mike has too. But I've worked for a couple of different institutions. This institution, WashU in St. Louis, has the most responsive and friendliest financial aid team members I've ever worked with. They are not going to respond to any of your questions with, "Oh, you're bothering me," or, "Oh, I'm so busy." They're a lovely set of people. And so I really encourage you to reach out to your SFS counselor. If you need anything, even if it's not a question, you're just like, "Hey, I don't get this. Can you explain it?" They're more than happy to answer you. So just want to put that little plug out there because I know it can kind of be a little bit intimidating to reach out to these people. So Mike, can we pay the full year tuition in one payment instead of monthly to get a discount rate?
Student accounting does not offer that as a possibility.
All right, easy enough. Um, this is a question that is related to another question we had. Do you get the same financial aid if a sibling is in graduate school?
So that's a great question. And the answer is not necessarily. For graduate school, we are looking at what is a family paying, what are those parents paying out of pocket to help with graduate school? Many graduate students and professional students are borrowing or parents are borrowing. So it depends. For graduate students, it depends. I would reach out to your aid officer.
Absolutely. Okay, this last question we have is, well, I'm going to say second to last question, because I have a question for you, Mike.
Mhm.
How does housing work alongside financial aid? I'm a part of the QuestBridge program, and I understand that given financial aid offer is based on a modern double, but if I were to choose a different room, a modern single, traditional double, etc., what would be done?
So um, generally, financial aid will cover the modern double. If you are in a if you choose a less expensive house, a less expensive housing option, financial aid it has to adjust downward to account for that. If you were to choose a more expensive housing option, we would not automatically cover that. But, so some students might have some savings that they wanted to use to pay that difference. But your financial aid officer would have a conversation with you about that. And there may be instances where financial aid can help with something like that. So I think that that's an opportunity to make a friend in the financial aid office.
Absolutely. Excellent. Another question just slipped in, but I think this question is actually a question that should be directed right to their SFS counselor. So, anonymous attendee, I'm going to ask you to ask your SFS counselor. I think this is a really good conversation you could have with them. But Mike, the last question I have is truly just a me question to you. Is there anything that you didn't hear a question about, Mike, that you wish you had because there was something that you really wanted to make sure our attendees left with in terms of an understanding of how financial aid works at WashU?
Well, I think the most important thing, and I think I've talked about this a little bit, but it's hard to get a sense being in a webinar and not being able to see faces. It's hard to know if people are nodding, and if if I am feeling if I am seeming to people as approachable as I think our financial aid office is, because I don't want I don't want financial aid to intimidate any student who's considering WashU. And I mean, a phone call, sometimes it doesn't seem easy to reach out to the financial aid office. Email's a lot easier than a phone call even. And we're just as happy with an email if you don't feel comfortable reaching out. But if you have a question and if you need something and if your financial aid isn't making WashU affordable for you and this is where you want to be, please reach out to your financial aid office. That's that's the biggest thing that that I really want to share if I could share one thing with folks.
I really appreciate that. And I think our participants appreciate that as well. So I will go ahead and close us out. Thank you all so much for being here. It really means a lot, especially all of the actual families here as well. It means a lot. We know that this is a family affair. We know that paying for college is something that is on everyone's mind, not just the student. And so, but we also know that you didn't have to be here. That you tuned in to learn more information about how to navigate this process. And so we do really appreciate it. Again, another plug after plug after plug. If you have any other questions, we've got Michael and his entire team waiting to help you navigate this process. So we really appreciate you all. Mike, I appreciate you personally, one-on-one. Love working with you. And for the rest of you all, we hope you have a great night. If we see you at a Bear Day in the coming days and coming weeks, we're super excited to see you there. And you have a great rest of your night. Please have a great rest of your night. Take care.
Justin, thank you, and thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Absolutely.